On this episode of Crime Scenes with Coffee Beans, join me as I take a dive into the case of Sef Gonzales, the 21-year-old who decided it was better to wipe out his entire family than face being disinherited. Coming up right after this. Hello guys, welcome to Crime Scenes with Coffee Beans. I am your host, Belinda Brady, and welcome guys, welcome to my little podcast that is officially a year old. Wow, I cannot believe it. A year ago, I was sitting there going, I want to start a podcast, and I did, and a year later I'm still doing it, and a year later you guys are still listening to me. So a huge thank you to everybody. Can't thank you enough. I really do enjoy putting this podcast together, and I like to tell people it is pretty much me having a chat with friends that I can't see about crimes, and hopefully raising awareness for some crimes as well that need awareness around them. And I like to do that while I have a coffee. So I do have coffee with me at the moment. Right now, what I'm drinking is a black coffee, and I've managed to find some different flavored coffee syrups. And one I've got at the moment is butter toffee, and I am really enjoying it. So good stuff. Now, normally I would do a shout out to listeners, but I've decided this episode I'm going to do a top 3 of where my listeners are coming from. Coming in at number 1 is Australia, followed by the US at number 2, and coming in at number 3 is New Zealand. Now we've got the UK and Ireland not too far away. So let's see who else we can get in the mix, guys. I love seeing where you are listening to me from. So please spread the word. Get me out there, see where you can listen to me from. I love seeing you pop up in my stats. This episode is titled Baby-Faced Killer Sef Gonzales. Now, the sources for my episode is murderpedia.org, sydneymorningherald.com.au, mamamia.com.au, and findagrave.com. I will put a little warning in here, guys. Some of this content is disturbing, so listener discretion is advised. And a quick mention that you can subscribe to me if you wish. If you do want to, you can find all the info you need on the Buzzsprout website. There's a subscribe link there, and if you do subscribe, you get bonus ghost story episodes. It might not be your go, but you don't know until you try. And Australia is a wonderfully haunted place, so let's discover it together. Now, whatever you're up to, walking, getting ready for work, getting ready for school, driving, if you've got a coffee already in hand or a cup of tea or whatever your drink of choice is, if you're settling down to bed for the night, lend me your ears, get comfy, and let's get stuck right into baby-faced killer Sef Gonzales. On the night of the 10th of July 2001, 21-year-old Sef Gonzales had dinner in Sydney with a friend, with the pair dining at Planet Hollywood in Sydney, followed by playing some games at a nearby game arcade. Seth returned home at around 11:30 p.m. and at 11:48 p.m. he placed a frantic 000 call, which is emergency services here in Australia, saying he had found his family, which consisted of his mother, father, and younger sister, all dead inside the family home, and it looked like they had been shot. Now this, my true crime friends, is what most of us would think is the beginning of the crime, but it's not. So let's see what I'm talking about, shall we? But in order to do that, we need to go back. Now, Sef Gonzales was born in September 1980 in a town called Baguio and in the Philippines, and I hope I have pronounced that correctly, to a prominent family that consisted of his father Teddy and his mother Mary. His sister Clodine followed in 1983, and in 1990, the island of Luzon, again, I hope I've said that correctly, in the Philippines, experienced a 7.8 magnitude earthquake, which destroyed the Gonzales family home and business, which was a newly built 40-room hotel. As a result, the Gonzales decided to relocate to Australia. Now, the family settled in Sydney, New South Wales, and by the late 90s, Father Teddy had requalified as a lawyer and he'd bought some land in the Sydney suburb of North Ryde, which is not too far from the city centre. It's in a pretty good spot, close to public transport, close to the city, but not so close. It's, I guess, you could still call it suburbs. And on that block of land, they built a beautiful home for their family and they settled in. Now, the Gonzales were a very close-knit family. They were devout Catholics and they had high hopes for their children. And in some aspects, I guess, they were reported to be controlling. Now, they especially had high hopes for their son, Seth, and they wanted him to do them proud. They wanted him to be a lawyer or a doctor. And Seth, unfortunately, wasn't going to head that way. He did study for 2 years at the University of New South Wales, but he dropped out. He then enrolled in law at Macquarie Uni, which is also in New South Wales, but he was not doing well. He was failing, and when his sister found out that he was lying about his grades, and how she found out was that Seth had falsified his grades and had offered to do the same for her, resulting in her telling their parents. They threatened to take his prize car off him, and to top this off, his mother threatened to disinherit him if he didn't stop seeing a girl that she didn't like. Now, it might have seemed that Seth's world was imploding, but it is worth noting that Seth had a reputation for lying and for being a bit full of himself. As we go on, will definitely be a character trait that is very in line with his character. Now, frustrated with his lack of academic skills and his parents and their demands on him, he came up with a plan. Most of us would think, okay, I'll put my head down, bum up and study hard. But no. Seth thought something totally different. He thought that if his family was wiped out, he would be in the clear. He could drop out of uni. He could do whatever he wanted. And at this stage, he was dangerously close to failing pre-law at uni anyway. So if his family were gone, he could see whoever he liked and do whatever he wanted, with the house and the family inheritance as his safety net, I guess. So for Seth, it was a no-brainer. That's what he needed to do, and he came up with a plan. Now, he initially planned to murder his family with poisonous beans, and I promise you that's not made up, which he found out about after typing methods of killing into the internet on his laptop. There he learned that by mixing these beans with food, they would slowly poison your intended victim, giving them a slow and painful death, and possibly giving the impression that the victim died from food poisoning. So he ordered the beans from a site in Byron Bay, New South Wales, and from the US. Now, to cover his tracks about the family that he was about to poison, he decided to set up a contamination scare at a major food company. And I couldn't find out which food company this was, but he sent them a letter which read, 3 of your products have been poisoned. By now they are on supermarket shelves. This is what you get for treating employees like garbage. Good luck finding infected cans before someone dies. Go to hell! ! Now, he also sent this letter to the Australian Quarantine Inspection Service and to the Australian Federal Police. Now, I also couldn't find if they acted on this letter, but I can tell you the beans arrived. They existed, and after he actually did put them in his family's food, his mother was admitted to hospital with stomach aches and suspected food poisoning, but luckily for her, she survived. Seth also acted like he had suffered a bit of food poisoning, I guess, to throw people off his scent, but that never went anywhere. And his mother Mary was home, and Seth had to come up with another plan. So frustrated, Seth had to think of something else, and the plan that he came up with was absolutely horrific. On the 10th of July 2001 at around 4 p.m, Seth left his father's law firm where he worked part-time and headed home. At around 4:30 p.m, armed with a baseball bat and 2 kitchen knives, he entered his sister's room and attacked her. Now, Clodine, who had only turned 18 the day before, was studying at the time and was unaware of the horror about to be unleashed on her. Now, Seth tried to strangle her. He hit her over the head with the baseball bat at least 6 times and stabbed her multiple times. Now, after Clodine had succumbed to her injuries, Seth waited for his mother to come home, which was around 5:30 p.m. Mary arrived home at this time, and the minute she entered the house, Seth set upon her. He attacked her with one of the kitchen knives he was carrying, and she was stabbed so viciously her windpipe was completely transected. Mary also suffered stab wounds in her face, neck, chest, and abdomen. Seth, with his sister and mother both dead, all he could do was wait for his father to come home and inflict the same horror on him. But in what can only be described as divine intervention, Mary's sister and Seth's auntie showed up for a visit at around 6 p.m. She noticed the house was unusually quiet and dark, and the family's dogs were unusually quiet. Now, they had 6 dogs. Normally they're barking. She noted Seth's car was in the driveway and, thinking he was home, rang the doorbell. She got no answer, and for whatever reason, she decided not to enter and went home instead. Now, that decision would ultimately save her life. And just before this, at around 4:30 p.m, while Seth was lying in wait for his mother to come home, a client of Seth's father dropped some documents into the house's letterbox, and he too also noticed Seth's green Ford Festiva with its unmistakable personalised number plates of SEF 80G in the driveway. Now, Seth's father, Teddy, arrived only 50 minutes later and was immediately met by Seth. And like he had done with his mother and sister, attacked his father with the same kitchen knife, inflicting wounds to his neck, chest, back, and abdomen. One stab wound penetrated his right lung and another penetrated his heart. Another partially severed his spinal cord, and defensive wounds were found on Teddy's hands and arms, suggesting he put up a fight. After annihilating his entire family, Seth changed clothing and disposed of the ones that were covered in blood that he was wearing when he attacked his family, along with the knives he used and the shoes he was wearing. He showered, changed, and spray painted "Fuck Off Asians, KKK" on a wall in the house, in the hope that when he did call the police, they would immediately think it was a hate crime, and then left to meet up with his friend for dinner. They went to Planet Hollywood for dinner, played some arcade games, and then came home. He would then call the police and report he had found his family dead upon his return, all according to plan. Now, police flooded the scene, and from the get-go, they had their doubts. And Seth, of course, played the grieving son, even going as far to tell his neighbours that he performed CPR on his sister, who was already very, very dead, and tried to stop the flow of blood from her wounds. But the neighbours at the time thought, no, well, this is weird because he's pretty clean for a guy who's, one, tried to perform CPR on a multiple stab victim, and two, very clean for a guy who apparently tried to stop the stem of blood flow from a wound. So, only a few drops of blood was on him, which he dismissed when questioned. He said it was washed away in the winter rain that had fallen that night. See, Seth was outside with the neighbours while the police were in the house. So he told them that, oh no, the rain has washed this blood away. Now, the Gonzales family were beyond devastated at the news of their murder, as were their friends and their community, and of course their family back home in the Philippines. They were close to their family and they were killed in their community, in their homes. Like, why would this happen? And these guys pretty much kept to themselves. Why would they be the target of some random hate crime? It just did not make sense. The family were buried at Macquarie Park Cemetery to an outpouring of grief, and Seth, as many killers do, played the role of the grieving son, even going as far as to sing the Boys to Men and Mariah Carey's song One Sweet Day as a tribute. Now, this struck many at the funeral as odd, with one saying he seemed sad but so calm at the funeral. There were 3 caskets in front of him holding the mutilated bodies of his family, and he started to sing. It was really strange. Now, Seth had given the police a statement on the night of the murders, but relatives weren't buying it, and they started to distance themselves from him after the funerals. Now, police had questioned them one by one, and as more turned away and turned on Seth, with telling the police the level of lies that this boy, was capable of telling, some also told the police that they were scared of him. Now, his Aunt Emily, the one who visited the night of the murders and didn't go into the house, had a bad feeling about that night, telling police she had seen a flash of dark across the frosted glass window that was at the entrance of the house, and she initially thought it was a coat stand. So there was something standing there in black, like a dark shadow, and she thought it was a coat stand. But after police showed her pictures of the inside of the house, which showed no coat stand near the front entrance, she realised the killer had been hiding in plain sight. And within 3 days of his family's murders, Seth had met with his family's accountant to see how he could get his hands on his inheritance. I mean, your whole family has just been wiped out and you're meeting the accountant to see how you can get your hands on their money. But wait, folks, there's more. He sold his parents' cars. He put a deposit down on a Porsche and a Lexus. And when questioned by the salesman, who rightly questioned how someone so young could afford such an expensive car, Seth told him he was about to get a very big inheritance. On top of this, he tried to pawn his mother's jewellery and moved into an 11th floor apartment in the nearby suburb of Chatswood because he couldn't live in the family home anymore. He also set up a fan page for himself, telling friends who questioned it was made by another friend. He pestered his relatives in the Philippines who looked after the family's affair for money, all while playing the role of the grieving son. He even went as far as to offer $100,000 for any information leading to the arrest of the person or the persons responsible for the death of his family, and made a tearful TV appeal asking for them to come forward, saying, "It is difficult to explain the love and ties in my family, but if you were to picture the 4 corners of the world, in my world we were the 4. The 3 corners of my world are now gone." But the head of New South Wales Homicide Squad, Nick Caldis, was watching him closely. And he said later, my memory of that moment is that there were no tears. There were actions, but no tears. Now, the police, they're not dumb. They had no doubt Seth was involved, but they just needed the evidence. And that came when Teddy's client and Seth's aunt stated they had seen his unmistakable green car in the driveway with his unmistakable license plate. Now, when presented with this, Seth panicked and said that he'd actually been in a brothel but had been too ashamed to say where he had been. And naturally, police wanted to know what brothel he was in, but he didn't answer straight away. He went home, called brothel after brothel, which had been recorded because his phone was tapped, and asked how long they had been open for and did they have a surveillance camera. Now, he settled on a prostitute he'd seen before because he figured, I've seen her before, that fits in with my story. This was a girl who had worked at a Chatswood brothel, but Seth didn't realise that the girl was off that week when the murders happened, so he could not have seen her because she was not there. But he had no choice to stick with his plan, and he actually paid a taxi driver $50 to write and sign a statement saying he had driven Seth to the brothel that day. Police interviewed Seth's friends, and the lies he told over the course of his life, but at this moment were mind-blowing. He had told friends he had cancer. He told friends that after singing at his family's funeral, he had been offered a record deal. He told them he was training for the Olympics. He told them he attended the funeral of a 9/11 World Trade Center collapse victim and even paid for the victim's mother to attend with him. He told them he was starting a project to help street kids. He owned a TV production company, etc., etc. The lies were as mind-blowing as they were hilarious. So Seth had form. He was a pathological liar. And every statement from family and every statement from friends just backed this up. And despite all this, some friends said that he made them feel special. And he was very affectionate towards them, like most narcissistic people are. Now, police finally got the breakthrough they needed when Seth's fingerprint was matched to those poisoning letters. Now, remember when he tried to kill them with the poisoned beans, and he sent letters to a food company saying that the food had been contaminated. Well, Seth isn't as smart as he thinks he is because he actually managed to get a fingerprint on that letter, and the police found it and matched it. And of course, the addresses of the companies that he sent these letters to were found on his personal computer's search history. They had their smoking gun. They had what they needed. On the 13th of June 2002, nearly a year after he killed his family, Sef Gonzales was arrested and charged with their murder. He was charged with 3 counts of murder and 1 count of threatening product contamination. He was refused bail and was refused access to the family's estate to use for his defence, relying on legal aid, which is free access to legal representation if you can't afford it here in Australia, and he used them to represent him. The trial started in April of 2004, and the court heard of the poisoning attempts, the lies he told, and the absolute loathing he had for his family after he learned that he was going to be cut off. Sef Gonzales was found guilty of the murder of his father Teddy, mother Mary and sister Clodine on the 17th of September 2004, and was sentenced to 3 life sentences with no chance of parole. Justice Bruce James stated that the motive for the killings were to prevent his parents withdrawing privileges they had extended to him and to obtain his parents' wealth without delay and as their sole heir. The family home where the Gonzales family was murdered sat on the market for 3 years, and really I can't say I'm surprised. But eventually it was sold to a couple from Taiwan, with the only catch being the home's gruesome past was not disclosed to the couple, and they only found out about it after they read about the murder home being sold in the paper. Initially, the real estate agent involved, LJ Hooker, refused to reverse the sale, saying they had no legal obligation to do so. But eventually, they refunded the couple their $80,000 deposit after bad publicity. And they were also fined $21,000 from the New South Wales Office of Fair Trading. And after this, the New South Wales government made it illegal to not disclose any information that may have a substantial impact on the value of a property, like, mass murder, for example. The house was eventually sold to a buyer who was very well aware of the home's history. Now, Seth is currently serving his 3 life sentences in Lithgow Jail, New South Wales, and has appealed his sentence. He did that in 2007 and that was rejected. And in 2018 and 2019, he asked for a special inquiry into his conviction, which was also dismissed. However, this year, in 2025, 2 decades after he killed his family, he has won the right for an appeal. And from what I can gather, and this is still really fresh, this only came out maybe 2 weeks ago. From what I can gather, he is appealing on the grounds he had post-traumatic stress, which he claims started after being sexually assaulted by a priest as a child. Now, at the time of this podcast, his request has been referred to the Court of Criminal Appeal for assessment. So we'll just have to wait to see what happens there, guys. But you can Google it, keep an eye on it, see what happens, see how his appeal goes. But as it stands, he is still in jail, serving his 3 life sentences for murdering his family. And that's it, guys. Another episode of Crime Scenes with Coffee Beans done and dusted. Thank you so much for your company. You are all rock stars. And if you are liking these podcasts, please share away, leave me a review, send me some fan mail, buy me a coffee, leave me a comment on YouTube, subscribe, do whatever grabs you. I would absolutely love it if you did. And until next time, guys, thank you again for your company. And as always, stay safe, stay cool, and stay caffeinated. I will catch you all later.